Sometimes there will be a story in the church, if it's a big papal story or a big story related to the October Synod, then I'll probably be all over it. But if it's something like the one I'm about to introduce, I'll say, let me lay back in the pocket and, give you an update once everyone's already kind of taken a first crack at this thing. This is the perfect issue to do so. The fail last week by Cardinal Dolan, Archdiocese of New York, insofar as they allowed the opening of St. Patrick's Cathedral, some argue the finest church in America, in the Americas, to be used in what became a giant, flaming Skittles rollerblade convention for the ostensible purposes of a funeral, the funeral of a man named Cecilia Gentili, a known rollerblader, Transformers activist who founded the Transformers Equity Consulting Group. The topic of much conversation lately, I'm reading an article by Judy Brown called Cardinal Dolan's Epic Fail. Topic of much conversation lately has been the recent funeral that took place in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. The funeral has led to heated discussion. Cardinal Dolan, who presides over the Archdiocese of New York, said that nobody knew the background of the person who died and whose funeral was held in the cathedral. This was a man named Cecilia Gentili. It occurs to us, Judy Brown writes, that the reputation of Gentili preceded him and that there is little doubt that the cardinal knew who this person was. He's been contradicted by officials from his own diocese and the actions of officials of his own archdiocese, which testified to the idea that they definitely knew who it was. Of course they did. I'll show you why I say that in a few moments. But what is certain is that the events of that day bred controversy within the Catholic community. According to a New York Post article, those who put together the funeral for former sex worker Cecilia Gentili broke state law by duping the famed church into holding the service, wrote Brian Birch, president of Catholic Vote, in a letter to New York Attorney General Letitia James. Now, I'm not a New Yorker, but any New Yorker will tell you that this prized church is the would-be site for any faithful Catholic's funeral. I mean, like anyone that attends church regularly would want a funerary proceeding there at St. Pat's. No one could get this. You understand. Not just anyone could get this. There are several probably elite, prominent Catholics, political, cultural figures, wealthy private figures who could not wrangle for themselves a funerary proceeding at St. Patrick's Cathedral. So whether or not, leave aside for a brief moment, whether or not Cardinal Dolan knew who this Cecilia was. We're going to talk about the name Cecilia as regards Saint Cecilia in a second. There, a couple of rollerbladers came up and started saying that Saint Cecilia was a whore and was queen of whores. But okay, leave that aside for a second. Did Cardinal Dolan know? Of course he knew. Yeah, did you want to say something, Steph? I want to make a side point before you go.
Do we have his actual name?
I mean,
his God-given name.
His last name is Gentili. Mr. Gentili. There's only so much research. I don't care. I'm not that interested in the overturning of the dysphoria stuff. I know sort of center-right conservatives go nuts for this. Anytime I see like a TikTok vid or a Twitter vid or an Instagram account where it's like a normal guy, like red-blooded guy, like flames transformer just by saying the truth about that particular transformer's ontological realities. You're a man. And the internet, you know, the center-right internet erupts into standing ovation. I'm like, can we start at some point in my lifetime? I mean, maybe it'll have to be what a woman is. Return to videos where we leave aside that stuff. That's not really that exciting. Where a man, an old school, crusty New Yorker is talking to like a woman who's running for president, or a woman who's a lecturer at the college, or a woman who's sweeping the street, or a woman who's playing in the WNBA. It's like, can you just go home? Can you just go home? You're not a man, right? That would be really based. I'm sick of conservatives acting like this transformer stuff, anti-transformer stuff, is like a really cutting edge. It's not. That doesn't excite me at all to see an old crusty New Yorker telling this confused person, a man's a man, a woman's a woman. I want them to be telling the 99% of the women they interact with out on the street, hey, will you go home? You're not a man. Go home. All right, that's a side issue. Because today the topic is, in fact, the Transformers funeral that took place at St. Pat's. And, you know, now that little side screed is done, I was just making the point that whether or not Cardinal Dolan knew the identity of Mr. Gentili, who was being eulogized, if you call it that, in this rollerblading phantasmagoria of spectacle that took place after Mr. Gentili died on February the 6th. What was the actual date of the funeral, Steph? Would you grab that for me? Please. Thanks. I meant to look that up in the last minute. The guy died on February the 6th, but the funeral was just last week, maybe late the week before. We'll get you a date in a second. But they definitely knew. Like 6 days ago, yeah. Whether or not the identity of the guy and his whole biographical history was available to the archdiocese, what was certainly known was a lot more than that. Was the idea that, look, this will be a big spectacle. Had to be known, because they don't just let anyone have a funeral at St. Pat's. I guess it's a simple enough point. I was listening to John Henry Weston's LifeSite podcast, and he did a good job. And I'm going to play a pretty long clip and respond to some passages by Liz Yore, Father Charles Murr, and a fourth gentleman whose name's escaping me, and of course, John Henry Weston. And these are all people that are pretty identically aligned with where I'm at in ecclesial politics, right? None of them are rad trads. All of them are basically just like, when are you going to deliver the church, O Lord? The Francis Pontificatus. Just catastrophe after catastrophe. And this probably means something large is on the way. So I agree with all of them, but even these not center-right, far right-wing Catholics that do not pull punches get cowed into, and I think I'm friends with Father Murr. If I had him on the phone, I think I would make this critique, and I think he'd say, yeah, you're right. I would bet $100 he would, if I had him on the phone line. He'd be like, yeah, you're right. We all get cowed, even far-right Catholics, into talking about the priest who presided over this catastrophe, who has another Irish last name. What is it? Buchanan or something? Yeah, I keep seeing it. I'm like Dolan, Buchanan, whatever this guy's name is. It's like we allow ourselves to talk about the priest as if, well, he's definitely in on it. But then we make that jump to bishop, archbishop, cardinal, and we play this bizarre game that they're less responsible than the grunt parish priest. That's not how any organization is structured. And it's not structured that way precisely because responsibility follows shianter, knowledge. And it follows some other, discretionary authority. Knowledge, shianter, is based on discretionary authority. Responsibility follows knowledge and discretionary authority. So it's not, why do we naturally flip into this mode where we talk about, well, Cardinal Dolan is guilty of being politically correct and not intervening enough. Whereas this priest, whatever his name is, let's just call him Buchanan, who is presiding at Mr. Gentile's rollerblade fest of a funeral. The mass was stopped. Someone rushed in and stopped the mass. I'm a relatively big guy, and I'm sitting at an L desk, and I'm always knocking shit over here. I have big elbows. I don't know what my wingspan. What is my wingspan? Almost 6'6", and it's like I'm knocking stuff over at an L desk. I'm not a guy who should be seated at an L desk. I think I have a 6'5" wingspan, but anyway. The guy, someone rushed in from the archdiocese and did, in fact, have shianter knowledge that this needs to be downgraded from a mass to just a funerary rite, So the Eucharist should not be dispensed. There shouldn't be a consecration. I think the tabernacle lamp was lit. So all this happened in front of Jesus. I have thoughts on that too that might be different. I have a lot of thoughts on this that might be unique. But as for the way that we're sort of cowed, not by anyone in particular, just by the dictates of the faith, into talking about, well, Cardinal Dolan, he's being politically correct here. But the priest was actually going along with the ceremony, the one presiding over it. He's even worse. We have to stop that way of thinking. If we believe in pyramidal hierarchy, more glory at the top, more authority at the top, then we have to, Catholics, parish orphans, retrogrades, start talking about the tippy top of the pyramid, which of course is the pontiff, as having the most blame as well. With credit comes blame. With benefit comes burden. If there's the most benefit, then it's because the most burden is risked by having a position of authority. The famous saying in business is, when you're in management, everything's your fault. And that is said unfairly to middle managers by corporate all across this company. And it's said in context, people out there who work for a living are nodding their head. Middle managers are told this in a context where they legitimately don't always have shianter, the knowledge. And they'll be told, as they're being chastised for the misdeeds that were well out of their knowledge, well out of their sight, by corporate. Well, you should have known. How should I have known? We don't know how you should have known. You just should have known. In the Catholic Church, even minds as great as John Henry Weston, myself, I'll throw myself in there, because if I was on this panel with them, and I could well have been, because we agree about this stuff strongly. Liz Yore, Father Murr, the other guy whose name I'm forgetting, I probably would have done it too. It's just sort of the force of our faith resting on our chest, sitting on our chest. Like, I can't breathe when I'm in that situation. And now I look at it. I'm going to play you a big clip, a long clip, like a 9 or 10 minute clip from this. They had a lot of great analysis, mostly great analysis. But it would happen to me too, probably if I were in that setting, where you start slipping into the context wherein, the most that a guy with a red hat, a cardinal, could have done is being politically incorrect or maybe a little negligent. Instead of assuming he has shianter and discretionary authority, he's probably the one that really wanted all this to happen, which is always the case. That's always what we should be assuming. When you're in management, everything is your fault. And it's not simply in the sense that a middle manager is blamed for everything by corporate as the patsy. That's actually unfair. The Catholic cardinals and archbishops over their dioceses know all the important stuff that's going on. They know, they're the ones who are guaranteeing, they're the guarantors of the fact that the only people who can get funerals at their most celebrated churches are always the rollerblader crowd who come in there, are desecrating our saints. I was gonna play it, and I'm not particularly pearl clutching about this stuff, but they're calling Saint Cecilia the mother of all whores. That might be in the clip I grabbed. It might not. I forget. I have a lot of different points to make today. So they come in, and you read this article that I'm reading from that just came out today, and
Father
Doherty. All right. Yeah, Irish. The old potato Doherty. Okay, so Father Doherty was the presider. He opens up, he says, "Oh, this is more than we usually get aside from Easter Mass." And he's like, "This is great." Cardinal Dolan called him a hero. Doherty and Dolan and Buchanan and all these Irishmen. He called him a hero after the fact. And, he's also covered his ribs, saying no one knew the background. So they come in. Father Doherty is saying, "Oh, this is great." He's really happy. He sees what they're all doing. They're all in their leather and feathers, and literally, and they're carrying on. You know the way they carry on. I mean, not all of you guys are from Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York, but you've seen enough movies. You know what they do. You know how they act. And he's really pleased. He's like, "This is great. This is so great. You guys are you're so." I forget exactly what quotation he makes, but he's like, "This is such a great big crowd. What good energy." If I had to paraphrase, this is what he says. This is the man Dolan called a hero. And so we're just kind of left in the wake. We, the Catholics, who should be history's great winners, because we have the one true faith, time and again, we're the losers. And I want to submit to you today that it's not because of them. It's because of us. It's not them, it's us. Like Tom Hanks tells his neighbor in The Burbs. It's us. It's the pathetic loser attitude that everyone gets cowed into. Instead of saying, "Look, these people are our enemy. Pray for them. But mark them as your enemy. And just say, "No, we're not letting you in our church. We'll pray for you. No, we won't help you out. We won't help out your political lobby. We will cripple it at every potential chance. We'll pray for you. We'll pray for your conversion." That's all we can do. If the people in those towns won't hear you, Jesus told the apostles, move on to the next town and strike the dust from your sandal. Kick it off. Loving your enemy doesn't mean you let the enemy at the gate in. And bend over for them, especially not this crowd. That's not what you do. That's not loving your enemy. Not that kind of erotic love. And I think just Catholics, through the extreme outstripping of Catholic manhood, and probably worse than any other sect of Christianity, you have, screeching women running households. Catholicism's the worst, infiltrated. And having the church run by, there's no other way to say it, but they're not kings or princes. They're queens or princesses who run the Catholic Church. This is the nail in the coffin, right? If you didn't know it before, the Catholic Church is run by a queenly princess lobby.